Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Healing Words podcast. In 2016, Pamela Topchian was at her lowest, suffering the lingering effects of childhood trauma compounded by two abusive marriages and suicidal ideation. On a whim, she purchased a one-way 3-day cross-country bus ticket. It was a trip that changed her life. Today, her message is clear. We each hold the power to transform our lives. Thank you for being with us today, Pamela.
Oh my goodness, thank you. It's such an honor. Happy to be here.
Okay, so 2016, you buy a one-way ticket,
Hmm.
one-way bus ticket,
Yes.
and you were at your lowest. You were thinking suicide.
Right.
But before we talk about that trip, let's describe your life the year leading up to that.
Okay. So I had the year leading up to that, I had had a divorce of my second husband. As you said, both were toxic marriages, abusive. And after that divorce, I just had a major breakdown and I really felt like everything should be great now. Like I'm alone, I have a good career, I've left the husband, everything should be wonderful. But it didn't work out that way. I just totally crashed. I was very fearful all the time. I was anxious. I was, like you said, I was suicidal, so I was very depressed, and I almost couldn't function to take care of myself. And that was pretty much that whole year leading up to the bus ride. And I had like almost plans for suicide. What really kept me from it, most people say it's their kids. For me, my kids were already adults, and I kind of felt like I was a burden to them, like they would be better off without having to worry about mom, and whatever the heck she's going through. And it was more my mother is the reason that I was trying to stick around. I have a sister that was killed in a car accident in 1980. And my mother had already lost one child, and I didn't want to do that to her. So that was what kind of gave me the strength to hold on just a little bit longer, to see if I could possibly come out of this. And yeah, so really that year leading up to it was trying to survive, trying to take care of myself through this major breakdown and feeling like just so confused by it. I had no idea why I was, breaking down the way I was. And always having nightmares, reliving violent experiences, and just, yeah, just fearful, anxious, depressed, feeling hopeless. That was that year,
Yeah.
trying to
And
live.
I can see why you would feel that way because in your abusive marriage, you were probably trying to stay alive. And I think that, I'm wondering if your thinking was, okay, now I'm safe. He's not
Yeah,
here. I'm not being harmed. I get to
right.
breathe again. But that's not what happened.
Right, right. That's why it was so confusing, because I thought that everything should be great now, and it just wasn't. But I had been through therapy, at later after that, and I realized only then did I realize that all the childhood stuff, which I know we'll get into later, but all of that stuff was finally kind of coming to the surface. And like you said, during the marriage and even the first marriage, so a lot of my adult life was really just trying to live and just trying to have a normal life, a typical life, and um, just go kind of going through the motions and being a mom and enjoying that part of life. But yeah, it was, once I had no little children, didn't have either husband or anything. It just all crashed down on me, and I was confused by it. So that added to the sort of hopelessness, just being so confused, like what's going on with me? I should
Right.
be, I felt like I should be happy now, but yeah.
Was your presentation one of someone who was depressed? If someone, did your coworkers know you were depressed? Did your friends know were you depressed? Was it obvious?
So I was really turning down a lot of invitations to just visit with friends or go out anywhere with friends. Um, I don't think that people really knew how much I was going through within me. I I still have a hard time kind of expressing my sadness or emotions, so, during the childhood when my sister was killed, one of my mom's friends, and I was just before I was 14, said to me, "Don't you cry, don't you cry. You be strong for your mother." And ever since then, it kind of was really, and also then when I was really little, like there was no adult around. It didn't matter if I was sad or needed anything because it didn't matter. So I was not good at expressing. I was really good at keeping to myself, keeping it all inside. And like in my first marriage, we went to marriage counseling, and the counselor said, "You are really self-contained." And she's so right. I was, but at the time I was like, "Oh, what? What does she mean by
That's a
that?"
nice way to put it, though.
I totally had no self-awareness, but I was. So,
Mhm.
so my coworkers knew what I was going through with my ex-husband because there was a long time before I married that he was struggling with addiction, and he was in and out of mental health facilities, recovery facilities, and just in and out of these things. And I was like working like 12, 16-hour shifts. So I
Wow.
was really, really already burnt out. And this is just before the divorce and just before he had really that last sort of beating up of, where I ended up unconscious on the floor of the closet. And so the coworkers knew what I was going through with him. And when I divorced, then I don't know that my coworkers knew that I was going downward instead of, doing much better. But I did not stay at that job all that long because I could not really get a day off for court because I had to get divorced. I couldn't get a day off, and we were really short-staffed. And the way nursing is, I mean, any nurse will understand that.
Yes.
And so I had, I had earned my time. I should have had been able to, and trying to go through the regular means, I couldn't even get a day off for that. Um, and so I ended up just, calling in sick for the day I needed, and
Mhm.
they were not happy about that. But I ended up leaving that job not long after that, partially for that reason, but also partially because I was really fearful. This is the only place that he knows where I'm at, because I had moved to he didn't know where I had moved to. Um, and as far as he knew, I left the state, which I hadn't at that point, but I, made sure he didn't know where I lived.
Right.
But I was still very scared that I would be followed home or that he would wait for me outside work. And I realized that, I'm always looking out the window. I'm always watching the door. And also I was starting to go through this breakdown, and I was not doing my best as a nurse. I had left that job and I had tried to find other jobs that were not nursing. And I just ended up having panic attacks and ended up being depressed and anxious. And I just was not able to, I wasn't working then. I do a little bit here, a little bit there, and I wasn't. So that was part of the getting on the bus as well, part of
Right.
leaving as well. Hmm.
So you mentioned, okay, so a friend invited you.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, so let's
suggested it. Yeah.
suggested it. So let's talk about that because even then, uh, before the bus trip,
Hmm.
you had suicidal ideation, like
Yeah.
you were planning.
Yeah.
So what made you switch your plans? What made you say, hey, instead of doing this, I am going to
Yeah.
buy this one-way bus ticket to the other
Yeah.
side of the country?
Well, like you said, it was a friend, and they were also going through a terrible divorce. And it was actually like a neighbor of the new place I moved. And so he was also going through a terrible divorce and was very anxious and depressed and everything else. And he was going to move to California and said, "This might be something you want to do, just get away from everything here, a fresh start, and just start over, a new place, start over." And so I started looking into it, and I actually called my landlord and said, just a heads up, I may be leaving the state, talking about breaking the lease and everything. And they knew that I was having trouble. It was just like a small house, and it was just a couple that owned the house. So it wasn't like a big corporation or management company or anything. So I was
Mhm.
dealing with one-on-one with people, not a business. And when I called them and told them about this, they said, well, we were thinking of selling the house anyway. So do you think you can be out in 2 weeks? So that was
That's a
kind of
sign.
like, yeah, so that was huge in
Right.
making that like, okay, I got to do this now. And so what I did was I started looking for like jobs that I could do, like living in somewhere, because I knew that I couldn't just get off the bus and have a place to live, and I wasn't going to be homeless. And so me and this friend, like we weren't going together. It was just kind of like, it was like, I don't know when he was going to go. He was kind of waiting for things to fall in place for him. And I just started looking into it separately. And so I found a place that I could go to that was kind of like somebody had an in-home business and an extra room and was going to that they needed more help with their business. It ended
Wow.
up being a terrible situation, and that's my third book I'm writing. But but I got out of that within 3 weeks and started a real kind of in-home care job where I could
Mm.
live there and work.
Okay.
Um yeah, so the main thing was first the suggestion by the friend, and then the landlord saying, "Can you be out in 2 weeks?" And then finding this situation, which I thought was a good situation at the time, and then being able to go there. So it's like, okay, here we go.
And I'm still struck by the fact that in all of this, leading up to this, again, I hate to keep focusing on it.
It's
You
okay.
had thoughts of ending it.
Hmm.
However, were you getting hopeful while you were making new plans to leave? Did that
So
make you feel better?
I was I can't say that I felt hopeful, but I must have. You know what I mean? In hindsight, there must have been a little bit of hope. I was holding on for my mother because I had a sister that was killed in a car accident when we were kids. I didn't want my mother to have to lose another child.
Okay.
So I was basically holding on for her. And if this was like a last ditch effort, I knew that if there had to be a big change. There had to be something major to happen for me to not let those suicidal thoughts win, because I didn't see any other way where I was. I was
Okay.
not able to get the help that I needed. I was not able to take care of myself, really. I
Mhm.
was concerned with my own self being alone. It was like, how do I know when I have slipped over that edge?
Right.
And just knowing that I had plans and thoughts in mind for suicide, just knowing that, knew that it was okay. It was like I was taking care of myself almost as a mental health patient. It was like, I need to, something has to happen. Something major
Right.
has to happen. Whatever
Mhm.
I'm doing is not doing it. So,
Okay. All right. You mentioned just briefly some abuse in your childhood, neglect.
yeah.
Let's talk about a little bit about that because it definitely followed you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So, my parents divorced when I was 9, and before the divorce, I was like at my mother's hip, and she was a Girl Scout leader, she was a Sunday school teacher, and my sisters were 4 and 5 years older than me, so they were teenagers. But my parents would, argue and yell at each other. My mother would go out on the porch and smoke and cry, and I would go sit next to her. And then when they divorced, it was in the 70s, and there was no laws for deadbeat dads or
Right.
alimony or any of that. My mother did not get any help from my father, and she had 3 little girls and no college education. She went to school, I guess, the 50s. Um, so Yeah, so it was very rough. So we had, we were hungry a lot of the time. We moved a lot of the time. We were evicted some of the times, and my mother wasn't around. There was no guidance or supervision. And so that's sort of the neglect as far as being hungry and moving a lot and sometimes not having a place to live. And there was some sexual assault from teenage boy when I was about 12. And then later on as a teen, there were a couple date rapes that I had went through. And so yeah, so
Mhm.
that's my childhood. you
Okay, okay.
And my
Um,
sisters were never around either. I believe it's never been said, but just knowing, they were probably supposed to watch me and probably supposed to stay with me, but they were teenagers, suddenly no parents. They went off on their own.
right, okay. So two marriages, both
Hmm.
not ideal.
Right.
Let's talk a little about that because before we lead into that, I want to know about your self-confidence, your sense of self
Yeah.
before, while you're dating and how that showed up in your platonic relationship and
Yeah.
career choices, that kind of thing.
So, before I was a nurse, I always worked in daycare. And so you had mentioned before we started recording about, you know, um, people going in these caring fields. And it's interesting to me because I did not always want to be a nurse. I never thought about what I was going to do because I was so young when I became pregnant. But so what was that question that you asked me?
Your personality and your sense of self, your
Yeah.
self-confidence coming out of what you went through as a child, do you
Yeah.
feel that that influenced your choice of men?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I didn't know myself. I didn't know
Mhm.
myself like until I was 50. I didn't really know myself. I didn't have my own identity. I was always trying to keep people from being upset or mad. I did not share any of my own negativity or what was going on in my life as far as anything that, was negative going on in my life. I didn't share it with people. As far as dating, I always had controlling men, and I'm sure that that's because of just being the type that is easily controlled because I had no sort of, I didn't stand up for myself ever. I never
Right.
spoke up for myself. I
Mhm.
didn't even know myself to know, like, I couldn't have said what I was interested in because I just followed along whatever
Right.
whoever I was dating was interested in and
Mhm.
just kind of went along with, I didn't know, I didn't have my own sense of self. And so I didn't have
Exactly.
any confidence. Growing up, there was nobody around to show me that I mattered or that my feelings mattered. And so that showed up in my adulthood that, it doesn't matter what I think, so yeah. So that
And it's
was
interesting that the men or the people who are
mhm.
bullies and control, they spot that. They
I
see that. That
know.
makes you a target.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder, like, is it just like an energy field or something? Because it's like they just really, like you said, it's just they can really hone
They
in on
know.
that. Yeah.
My
Yeah,
goodness.
right.
Okay, so two abusive marriages,
Hmm.
um, self-esteem in the toilet, not
Yeah,
feeling great about yourself,
right.
suicidal ideation. Then you take this bus trip. You go to the other side of the country, go to
Hmm.
California. What
Right.
happens out there? What made the change after this bus trip?
So the main major change, because I found I was still fearful, and I found that I was still, once again, it was like, why am I still feeling
Right.
everything should be great now? Once again, everything should be great now. Um, but I ended up going for some therapy. So that was the big thing. And I highly, highly recommend, if you find yourself in these spots, even if you don't know, like I went to a doctor because I thought, well, I can't sleep. I'm having nightmares. And I knew that I was anxious, but I didn't think of therapy. I thought of, I need medicine to help me sleep, is what I was thinking. And the doctor really actually wanted to put me in, in the hospital. But I had to sort of promise that I wouldn't do anything, and, that I would keep the information for the suicide hotline with me. And at that time, when I went to the doctor, I was house and pet sitting, but the woman lived there still, but her mother had just passed away. So she was my same age. Her mother had just passed away. She had a full-time job, but there was also pets and a house. So it was like, this was a perfect situation for both of us. It was a win-win
Right.
situation. So I had convinced the doctor too that, I had these pets to take care of. My friend just lost her mother. I would not do that to her, and so he let me not go into a hospital. But then I went for therapy, and I was thinking, what am I going to say to the therapist? Oh, I got a divorce and now I can't handle myself. Like I didn't even know. I didn't even think of all the childhood stuff as being something that was coming up now. But but yeah, so I went to a therapist and ended up with EMDR therapy, as well as, just talk therapy and psychotherapy. And so even if you don't know what's wrong or what you're going to say, that's their job to figure that out.
I was just
It's
thinking that. Right, right.
it's not your job to figure it out. That's why you're going. So yeah, so that was my big thing, is like I didn't really know what I was going to say or why I was going. To me, it was like I can't sleep, which is making the anxiety worse and making the depression worse, and unable to kind of function. And and I didn't understand why I was feeling so depressed and anxious when, again, everything should be fine now. So yeah.
Right. I want to talk about, you mentioned the statement I made to you when we were chatting before
Yeah.
I pressed record, that it's been proven that a lot of times people with traumatic backgrounds,
Mhm.
are motivated. They're geared toward the
Yeah.
helping
Yeah.
professions, religion, medical field, and you're a nurse.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, while you were going through this, did any of your medical training kick in? Did you say to yourself, you're depressed, you need to, this is what's
Yeah.
happening? Or does that totally overshadow that?
Well, before the bus ride, so when I was still, before I had taken that bus ride, knowing that I was making a plan, like I had that self-awareness of knowing I was making a plan, and close to suicide. I think that maybe if I didn't have that medical background, I wouldn't have been as aware of myself making a plan and what a big turning point that is. And
So
also
you were
knowing,
aware, you were
right.
using that terminology, I'm making a plan.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. And it was almost like you have to snap out of it. It's like, what am I
Mhm.
doing? This is a major point. Like if you're having a checklist with a patient for depression, that's one of the things you're asking. And that's a major question there. And, if I turned myself around and asked myself those things, that would be a major turning point. Even though it didn't make sense to me at the time, I couldn't understand why I was feeling this way. I knew that I was very close.
Mhm.
I knew that if my mother wasn't alive, I probably would have done that.
Mm.
And so that was, that's the only place I can think of that I used my own sort of, medical background, just having that awareness and kind of looking in on myself almost as, wait a minute, this is a major turning point right here. And you're not just a little bit sad, or you're not just having a hard time getting through this. It's something major. Yeah.
Right. Okay, I want to flip over to your relationships, your marriages again.
Okay.
Um, you have said that you take responsibility, you recognize your role
Yeah.
in those relationships, and that's a huge thing,
Yeah.
because for someone who has been as traumatized and is harmed physically and emotionally
Hmm.
as you are, it's easy to say they did it because that's
Right.
true, but you're also taking um,
Yeah.
responsibility. Were you always aware of that, or at some point were you always putting the blame on them?
I never had blamed them. And I didn't blame myself as much either. It was just kind of like, especially with the first marriage, it was like, this is just the way it is, kind of like, like again, still feeling like I didn't matter, or it was only until I noticed that my husband was criticizing me and being controlling of me around my children is when it really hit me that this is a terrible situation. And I didn't want especially my daughter to think that that's okay in a relationship, that this is not a healthy marriage. And, I didn't want to be criticized in front of my children, basically,
Right.
So that was a major thing for me. Um, but I didn't think of it as blame. It was just more of like, well, I knew that I wasn't standing up for myself. I knew that I wasn't, it wasn't ever a fight because I didn't
Mm.
say anything. I went away from any of it. I wasn't. It ended up where I wasn't in the same room when he was around. I just would make sure that I was somewhere else. And so it was more of not standing up for myself. And and in hindsight, it's more of not necessarily ignoring, but not recognizing red flags. Throughout, there's so many times in both of the marriages that it's like, I should have left then. I should have left then. I should have left then, and and what I really should have done, uh, other than not marry those people, and other than, having therapy sooner, I should have tried to just try to help the relationship and say, this isn't working. Let's get some counseling or therapy, or what can we do to work on this together? Or what do you think this is working? Because it's not working for me,
Right.
just be
Have a
more,
voice.
yeah, have a voice and be more proactive in the relationship. But so, I mean, if I take full responsibility for just not speaking up for myself, not recognizing red flags even before the marriages, for just, yeah, basically not speaking up for myself, not getting myself the help when needed, and not trying to work with them, you know, but, had I been in a healthy mental state, I wouldn't have been with them anyway,
Right.
So,
Exactly. Exactly. There was a relationship I was in while you're talking. I was just thinking about it because sometimes I think back to our second conversation, and I knew then
right.
red flags. And I'm thinking, you know, anyway,
Yeah.
hindsight, as they say.
Right, right,
So
right. We
just
live
so
and
that we're
learn.
clear, yeah, I know these were abusive marriages across the board. There was a particularly um, point in the last beating, if you can
Yeah,
discuss what happened there, because from there you moved forward, even though you were
right.
still the suicidal ideation was still going
Hmm.
on, but you recognized there, I may not live through this. So explain
Right.
that.
Yeah, so I had come home from work and it was I don't remember if it was a 12 or 16-hour shift, but it was a long shift and I was tired. And usually when I came home from work, he would already be in bed, either passed out or sleeping because he had a drug and alcohol problem. But when I came home, he was a monster. I didn't know what he was on. I didn't know what he was, didn't know what he was doing. He was throwing things around the house and that. Closed myself in a room and tried to keep, didn't have a lock on the door, and he kept barging through, throwing furniture around, yelling at me, pushing me around, and this like went on for hours, like,
Wow.
all night. And so he had a CDL truck driving license, and I don't think he was working at that time. But it was always said to me, and for some reason I listened, but it was always said to me, if you call the police on me, it's going to ruin my chances of getting work. So it was like everything I could do not to call the police. And I was just trying to leave. He wouldn't let me leave. And I called his friend and I said, pick up your drunk friend, he's getting violent with me. And his friend even said, don't call the police, right.
So basically, please let me abuse you
Mhm.
and don't destroy my means of making a living.
which he wasn't working most of the time anyway, you know? Um, so, so it ended up that he got in the room, like it had a little love, it was like a little sitting room almost. It was like a little bedroom in the house, but we didn't use it as a bedroom. It was like a little sitting room, had like a love seat, a bookshelf, basically that's about it. But he was throwing things around, and I went into the closet just to get out of the way. Because anytime I went for the door, he would block the door. I went into the closet to get out of the way of the furniture and him just bashing stuff around. And then he came in and just knocked me down, and I went unconscious, and that was that. And then when I came to, like, I didn't know, like, the time, I didn't know what, time had passed, and I didn't really understand what happened. And it's not till much later that I really realized this myself. Um, because it was for me, in my memory, there was this time missing, and I'm not sure exactly what happened where he wasn't in the room anymore and I was on the closet floor. Like, I didn't remember that at first until after therapy. But that was the moment when I woke up and he was not around, and that I called the police. And I knew at that moment I would never come back, you
Hmm.
know. And so I was kind of gathering some things, like all my scrubs for work, and just like some personal things, and pictures, just laptop, whatever, and tried to put it in the car. But when the police came, then I did that, and he started throwing things out of the house, and I don't know what he was on or what he was doing exactly, and I don't think he, like, I mean, we're not in touch at all, but if we were, I don't think that he would remember that or know exactly what happened, because he was really out of it. Um, but yeah, so I called the police, they came, and I was able to leave. And I went to a friend's house just for a couple nights, because I was already actually in the process of a divorce. And I
Yeah.
was with him. This is a huge mistake. And another thing people need to know is I was waiting for him to be able to take care of himself so that he wasn't left on the street. So he knew that I was divorcing because I found out he was drinking and lying, and he had a DUI, which I didn't know
Right.
that he had a DUI. I mean, that already ruined his chances for his CDL. But so yeah, so I already had this little house that I had moved into. I had already talked to the people, and they said, if you need to come earlier, because it was empty. And at the time, I was like, oh no, it's, I'm gonna wait a couple months or whatever.
I'm waiting for my
We'll see.
husband to
Yeah, to
quit.
be able to take care of himself.
Right.
Uh, so,
You were taking on an awful lot of
oh my
responsibility.
gosh, oh my gosh, I
His
can't.
career, not calling the police, and you were taking on a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, and he was in and out of, rehab facilities, in and out of mental health, floors of hospitals and stuff. And I would work so many hours, and I would just go to the hospital, and I would just break down in the car, and I'd
Yeah,
have to go give him, visit him. And if I didn't visit him because I was so dang tired and I was working more than full time, but if I didn't visit him, then he was, mad at me and whatever
exactly.
else, you know. And I found
So,
out too later, so I tried to call the doctors to find out his medicine, to find out what's going on with him. I could never get information. I found out later on that he had made it so, like, he told them that I was not allowed to get his information when I called, because they knew that he was an alcoholic and mixing the alcohol with his medications, and that's why he was always going crazy, and I didn't know that until one of the times
much later.
he was in a facility, and I needed to get him more clothes because he was going to stay longer. Went in his closet, found found a bottle, and then started finding them around the house. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So, from that,
Yeah.
you languished for another year or so, right? Because you got away from him.
I got away from him, and then that's when I was in that house where everything broke down.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Then you broke down. Then you took the trip.
Bus. Hmm.
Okay. And then your life, okay, slowly but surely.
Right. Slowly but surely got to this place.
Now
Yay.
you've written a book. Your book
Yes.
is titled, tell us the title of it and your main theme.
So it's titled, I Didn't Come This Far to Only Come This Far. So the theme of it is basically there's always hope, no matter how old you are, no matter what you've been through, there's always hope. You can get help. It can get better. And I kind of feel like I'm almost like every woman, like there's a lot of memoirs of people making it out of tough situations, but a lot of these people have been through really, really horrific situations and trauma and just you're being suicidal, being anxious, having these things happen to me that have happened to a lot of people, it can really bring you down. It doesn't have to be like something really, really horrific in like a horror story.
Right.
All too many women have been through a lot of the same kinds of things I've been through, you
And I
know.
think it's sometimes women, we will say it could have been worse.
Right,
We
right.
start comparing,
Exactly.
I only got beat twice a week,
Mm-hmm.
and this person got beat every day. The
Right,
comparing,
right,
but there is no comparison
right,
with trauma,
right,
right? If it harms you
right.
on that level, it's trauma.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if there's any triggers that come up, you're having nightmares or you hear a song, you see somebody, you hear a name, just even a little object, a piece of jewelry or a piece of paper it can be anything and it brings you back to that space or you're having nightmares of an event, no matter how, there's really no measure, like you were saying, of trauma. It's just like a pain scale. You're taught in nursing, you ask the patient what the pain is, and it's not up to you to say you're not in a level 6 pain, you have to be only in a 3 because of these things. It's, whatever the patient says, if they're in pain, they're in pain. Just
Hmm. Hmm.
because, you wouldn't be hurt by whatever they're going through doesn't mean that they're not hurt by what they're going
Right,
through. So
right.
yeah, it's all inside of you, and you cannot compare your trauma with somebody else's. If it's affecting your life, yeah, yeah, you
Yeah,
need to
yeah.
get help with that.
Yeah, I want to reiterate that point that that
Hmm.
trigger is a sign that there's some healing that needs to go on. It's
Absolutely.
not normal. Some folks are
Yeah.
walking around and just thinking they're going to have this trigger all the time.
Yeah.
And like you said, it can be anything. I remember
Hmm.
reading somewhere this gentleman, no, it wasn't a gentleman, it was a young man. The gentleman was telling the story. He worked with troubled youth. And this
Ah,
one
yeah.
boy, whenever he got anywhere near him, the boy would just go crazy. And
Mm.
later on, they found out that he wore the same aftershave that
Oh
this
my
young boy's
goodness.
father, so the
Yeah.
scent was a trigger for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it can
And
be
you're
anything.
right. And your triggers, you can be in a grocery store and a song comes on and I mean you're totally unprepared. It's not like where they're
Mhm.
gonna be. You can't just
Right.
avoid it. Um, but your triggers, I like to say your trigger is your friend because it shows you where healing is
Mm,
needed.
that's
It's
I
like
mean, yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
yeah, it's like your teacher, your trigger is your teacher. It shows you what you need to work on. If you thought you had healed, you can go through all the healing and all the therapy and whatever else, all the treatments, but if you're still getting triggers around something, that's the place you need to keep working on.
That's a good point. And a trigger is a
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question. Suppose someone has had a very challenging upbringing.
Yeah.
Um, they're getting healed, and because of their upbringing or bad marriages, violence, abuse, whatever, they don't know how to connect with people, but they very much
Right.
want to connect with people, but
Sure.
they have a lot of shame about the lack of connection.
Yeah.
What would be your message to them?
I think that a lot of people don't trust themselves because a lot of people have sort of failed them, or you feel like people have failed you, or you've not had those connections. So you feel like you either feel like I don't know how to do that, or I don't trust other people because it's never worked out. So it's a matter of building your own self-confidence. It's a matter of building your own value in yourself, having, self-care and self-love and self-confidence and self-respect. You need to work on yourself, and that's going to get you closer with people. And also, sometimes they don't trust themselves to recognize, when somebody is not really a good match for them, whether it's a friendship or romantic relationship. But again, look within yourself. How do you feel when you're with them? How do they make you feel when you're with them? Are you able to be completely yourself and open? And are you happy? Or, do you feel, closer with them? It's, you don't have to, am I on eggshells with what I say? Or, are you able to just be open about your own self? So it's more of everything is within you, and how do you feel, and how much self-confidence do you have? That's going to really reflect on who you attract around you.
Exactly. And that's not selfish. It is
Not at all.
actually right, looking out for yourself. Because
Hmm.
for such a long time, I was concerned about if I get in a relationship,
Yeah.
this person's going to misbehave, or they're going to cheat, or they're going to this, or they're going to that.
Right.
It has nothing to do with the other person. I set the
Right.
boundary. And as soon as it is demonstrated to me that you are not trustworthy and you're not going to be able to operate within that boundary or honor that boundary, it is
Right.
now then for me to make the decision to leave.
Right. Absolutely.
It sounds so simple, but it
Right.
took forever to get there. When you have a certain
Right.
upbringing, when you're used to making other people happy and putting
Right.
other people's needs ahead of yours,
Hmm.
yeah, it's radical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I am almost dangerous
Yeah.
because,
Right. Right.
oh my,
One thing wrong, forget it.
you gotta learn how to give grace too. Um,
Right.
There were, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, there was one friendship very
Oh, yeah.
recently that I had to cut off. And
Yeah.
I did it just like that.
Yeah. So,
Just like that.
the last probably 3 years or so, I've been really doing a lot of that. I have friendships that I've completely had to cut off because they really were not friends. And
Yes.
one thing too, I want to say, in one thing that I went through in therapy that helped me to have trust in myself with who I am in a relationship with, is the therapist had me think back to certain situations within both marriages, and what would you do now, or what could you do differently? So you kind of take back that control. You can't change what happened in the past, but you can think of how I would handle that now, or what would have been a better way to handle that. And then that sort of gives you that, that confidence that you now have that control within you, that, oh, now I know how I would handle that, and how that would have changed the trajectory of everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so you are married now.
I am. So again, I would not have been able to have this relationship if it wasn't for therapy. It's I didn't know this kind of relationship existed, completely respectful, completely equal. He's my best friend. We just took a trip together, and there's been a lot. We've been married for 4 years and together 8 now, or 7, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah. And and yeah, we've done things together, like, we've driven back from California, driven to Missouri to see my mother a few years ago, and we just took a trip together, through airports and stuff. So we've done these things that are like, kind of make or break
I was
relationships,
gonna
or
say,
really
could you
show
imagine
you.
taking a trip with your
No.
ex?
No, and that's part of the things with that helped us. So it was during 2020. So we were living together, and it was during 2020 when we both had different schedules and both were so busy. And during 2020, when the lockdown happened and we were just both home 24/7, weeks on end, we fell more in love during that. It
Oh,
wasn't like we couldn't stand each other, which which
right.
happened to a lot of people during that
I was
time.
gonna say that there was so much
Yeah,
domestic violence during that time.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And
Mhm.
so, we ended up taking walks at night around the neighborhood together and stuff. And our relationship just grew stronger through that. And so that's when we decided to get married. We were both in our 50s. So it's like, this is it.
Let's go ahead and do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we mentioned that I didn't come this far to only come this far. It makes it sound not only do I hear a battle cry, but it's like you're going forward. There's
Yeah,
no stopping.
right. So when I went through therapy, it's like when I started to see that light at the end of the tunnel, like I can remember it in the therapy office thinking, oh, I am gonna get better. It's like
Oh,
just like,
that's
oh my gosh, I am gonna get better. Like I could feel it.
that must have
And
been something after
yeah.
years of hopelessness.
Yeah. Yeah, and finally connecting those dots and finally understanding what brought me to that place. And writing out my book was a huge part of the healing. I didn't start writing it to publish it. I started writing it for myself to connect those dots, to get an understanding and some more clarity about what brought me to that spot, what brought me here, at that time. And so yeah, that was a huge part of my healing, but I remember being like, like, oh my gosh, there is that light. I can see a little bit of a light up there. And until that point, I was like, well, I'm going through the motions, hoping and thinking that maybe this is going to work. I can't just give up and not try. So I was trying, but when I saw that little spark of hope, then I knew that, oh, this is going to work out. I'm going to have a better life. But it's so much better than I ever even knew possible. So yeah, yeah.
I am thrilled for you.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank
so
you.
that's not your only book. Tell us about your other book.
Yeah, so the other one is Behind the Mask, Gloves and Scrubs, and it's all the nursing stories. And it's again, it's pretty graphic like the first book. So these books are not for anyone under 18, but it's just all the nursing stories and all the corruption and all the just all the unethical stuff and just and it's just my experience. I don't
Hmm.
want to speak for all nurses. Some nurses
Hmm.
love their job and and have great experiences. But that was not my experience. So in the first book, I do go through the nursing career a little bit, of course, but other people then were asking me more about that, and I'm like, that could be a book in its own, so
Right. And you're no longer a nurse at this point.
Right. So in 2021, I let my license lapse. And so in 2019, I felt myself. So when I moved on the bus, I was doing these sort of in-home care jobs and some pet and house sitting, as well as like helping, like as a caregiver for people as well. And I wasn't sure if I was going to go back to nursing or not because I was really burnt out on it already, but I needed more independence and to be able to take care of myself and to, if I wanted to move out of living under, doing jobs where I had to live there.
Hmm.
So I had went back to nursing, but I was feeling myself getting more and more burnt out by it.
Hmm.
And I knew again I had to do something. And I had already been through therapy and everything. And so I feel, I could feel this. I had this self-awareness to feel that this was coming on. And I didn't want
Right.
to get close to that point again. And so I took some hypnotherapy courses, which I had done previously, but wasn't able to switch. So I took some hypnotherapy courses and started doing hypnotherapy and really love it and love how powerful it is and the effect it can have on people, and became certified and started doing that. And through 2020, I was able to do that through Zoom, which made a huge difference.
Hmm.
I was so busy at that time, just one client after the other, all on Zoom. And and then in 2021, my friend who was a full-time pet sitter, she was getting so much, requests that she couldn't handle them and asked me if I would help her. And so then eventually, a couple of years later, I was getting my own clients and just doing that. And so I am now a hypnotherapist kind of on the side still. I'm keeping my certifications, valid and up to date, and doing pet sitting and house sitting like all the time. And I
Okay.
love it. I love every minute of it.
You've touched on it before, but if you had to give a one sentence summary of your life, what would it be?
A one sentence summary of my life, I think it's gonna be the title of my book. You know,
That's
I
fine.
didn't come
Yeah.
this far to only come this far.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Excellent. That's wonderful. And now are you working on anything now? Any new projects? You
So,
mentioned the third book.
yeah, so I do have that third book that I'm currently writing,
Mhm.
and that is about the experience when I first got off the bus. I don't know if I mentioned it here or not, but it was not a very good experience. It was another, kind of trying to be taken advantage of, but luckily I got out of it pretty
You got
quickly.
out of it quickly though.
Yeah, yeah, and so that was a big sort of confidence boost, and that was even before the therapy. Is like, "Oh, I gotta get out. I can't be here. This is dangerous." And just that recognition of that was sort of a confidence boost for me. So I'm writing about that situation. But I think that really that's my main big project that I'm working on. I'm always getting, so I have little certificates of things for pet sitting, like, you know, I don't know, like there's different certificates for caring for pets with cancer and caring for pets with diabetes and things like that. So I'm always working on adding more because having my background in nursing, I mostly take care of pets that are special needs or elderly pets,
Hmm.
and most of them take medication. Most of them can't be left alone, and so that's kind of my specialty with pet sitting.
Okay. Now your books are on Amazon. Is there an
Yes.
can you be found on social media if our viewers want to know more about you?
Yeah, so my books aren't really on my personal social media because I don't want my mother to ever see them because I think it would just break her heart and she would feel guilty and she doesn't need
Yeah.
any of that. So I don't
Right.
really advertise them there. But I have Hypno Breakthrough, and that's the same thing on Facebook and Instagram, Hypno Breakthrough. And then I
Okay.
also have Pamela's Pet Care, and that's also on Instagram and Facebook. And then I
Okay.
have a YouTube channel, which is a lot of guided meditations. I just started a new feature called Holistic Connections, where I talk with holistic practitioners. And the YouTube channel is just my name, so just Pamela Topchian.
Okay. Great. I'll make sure I put all those in the liner notes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we're at the point of our chat where I ask you the same 5 questions that I ask all of our guests here. We're the
Okay.
Healing Words podcast. I'm going to ask you a question with the first letter from the word words. And
Okay.
let's talk about this book, your first book. I didn't come
Okay.
this far to only come this far. When did you know for certain? Well, you said you wrote it not for publication, but when did you decide, you know what, maybe I should publish this?
Yeah, so during the time I was in therapy, I was also reading a lot of memoirs of women who had made it out of terrible situations. And I realized how much they were helping me to feel not alone and to know that, people have made it out of really terrible situations and have gone on to do really amazing things.
Mhm.
And I felt like those words were giving me inspiration and giving me hope. And I realized that my story could probably do that for somebody else as well. And even, like I said, somebody who maybe, wasn't, being sexually abused and had an alcoholic family or drug abused family or whatever, people that go through really terrible things throughout their whole life. Um, you know, just like your everyday woman who have been
Right.
through terrible divorces and have had a bad
Mhm.
childhood and whatever. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, we can do obstacles or we can use organize. Did you have to overcome any obstacles in the writing of this? And I'm
Yeah.
also wondering how you organized your day because sound like you had 2 jobs while you were writing this.
Yeah, yeah. So with the obstacles first, so I had to decide kind of, there's everybody's life involves other people's stories. So I had to be able to tell my story without giving other people's stories because I didn't want to have to ask. You know, um, it's not about asking permission as much as just it's not my place to
Right.
tell other people's stories. And I also had to after I wrote it and I was mostly done before I decided I was going to publish it, I had to go back and change names and change places and things like
Mhm,
that. So you
mhm,
couldn't
mhm.
see, couldn't tell
Right,
who was who. And even
right.
my name is not my name. Even though my name is and the author on the cover, my
Mhm.
name is changed in the story as well. So people that would know me would know who these people are, but just anybody reading it wouldn't be able to figure that out, you
Mhm,
know.
mhm.
So that was a big obstacle. And as far as organizing my day, so I worked in home health on night shift, trying to keep it as peaceful as possible for myself. And so I did a lot of writing while I was on night shift. I
Okay,
brought my laptop and I had to do like every 2 hour checks on my patient. And so I would write in between there and it would help keep me awake as well. But
okay.
also, a lot of writers will, I have to write this many words a day, or I have to, they make themselves sit down and do it. I did not do that. So when I felt like writing, I wrote. And when I didn't feel like writing, I didn't. Some of it was really hard to write, just going through the memories and stuff. And so if one particular area was really hard, then I didn't, then I just put it away for a while. I didn't
Right,
have a date that I needed to publish by.
okay.
Yeah.
Or rear view. Knowing what you know now, and I'm still struck by, the vision of you sitting in your therapist's office, getting a glimpse like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm going to get better. Knowing
Yeah.
what you know now, what would you tell yourself years ago when you were being abused?
Yeah.
When you wake up from being passed out after a beating,
Yeah.
what would you tell yourself?
Really just that I matter. Just knowing that my life mattered and knowing that ahead of you can be so much more than you ever even can imagine right now. I mean, it's just, I did not even fathom that my life could, that I would love my life so much and myself,
Wow.
just to know that that is possible. But I think also I would have really pressed on myself to get help, seek help sooner. You don't have to know what's wrong and what you're seeking help for, other than my life isn't going so well.
Mhm,
This isn't what I
mhm.
want for life. Just, reaching out for help sooner.
Okay. Delete. And you kind of mentioned this too. Or were there any stories that you said, I'm not putting that's too much, it's too vulnerable, it's somebody else's story, so I'm not gonna add this in.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So basically, that's really it. So like, when I went for, when I was pregnant as a teen, my friend and I both um, went to a what do they call that? Planned Parenthood place.
Mhm.
And we were going to get on birth control. We were both sexually active and knew we better do something about it. We both found out we were pregnant at that time. And she chose to terminate the pregnancy and I didn't. And so it was kind of, how much do I put of like her story in there? And, or just that much right there is
Mhm.
enough.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so there's that kind of a thing. And then like as far as really graphic with the date rapes and stuff, like how graphic do I want to be? How important is it to the story? Those kinds of things. Do I want it to be strictly, over 18, or do I want to make this a little more, palatable for somebody younger to read? So those
Mhm.
things were some challenges for sure.
And at the start of this talk, you did say these books are not for anyone under 18.
Right. So they are very graphic. And I think that I wanted to say, for people who might not have gone through these things, this is what it is. These are the things, this is how it is for anybody who hasn't gone through these things. To say, you've been sexually assaulted is one thing. To describe it as much as you can remember affects a reader a different way.
Correct, correct. Okay, S, strengthen. How have you been strengthened by the writing of both of your books?
Oh my goodness. So that I believe there is such power in telling your story. Every single time I talk about it, I feel like I heal a little more. You know what I mean? Um, and I feel like, knowing that my stories may help somebody else is again healing to my own heart, just knowing that my words and what I've been through has not just been for nothing, that other people are inspired or even just don't feel alone. Um, so I think that it helped me also to really connect the dots and to understand, just writing it all out.
You know, there's a woman somewhere who's read your books, who feels about your book the way you felt when you read other
Right.
people's book. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
that is amazing. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Yeah, we like I said, we went on a trip. We were just at the airport, and my husband and I both brought books to read. And I was thinking, how cool would that be if I saw somebody reading one of my books? I'd go up to them and say, "Hey, you want me to sign your book?"
I am a writer as well. And when people take say to me, "Oh my gosh, I love this. I got right into this." I'm like, "Really?"
Yeah, I
It's a
know.
wonderful feeling.
It is.
It's
It
a
is.
wonderful feeling.
Yeah.
Excellent. I want to thank you so much, Pamela, for dropping by and sharing yourself with our viewers today. It's been so enlightening.
Oh my
Um,
goodness. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely.
and I'm going to put her contact information in the liner notes. You all go get her books, go to her YouTube channel. If you're want information about pet care, check her out there as well. Thank you again, Pamela, for stopping by.
Thank
And
you.
we will see everyone else the next time on the Healing Words podcast. Bye bye.